So, the invention of chili con carne is a little bit contested considering the complicated relation that Texas and Mexico had in the 1800s. The southwest U.S. and northern Mexico have always had a tendency to just kind of like mush into each other and meld into each other since, prior to the Texas annexation in 1845, the idea of a U.S. border didn't exist. It was just like a big hot desert region with a bunch of horses and cowboys just shooting their guns going, yeehaw! But really, Texas was originally part of Spanish territory after the Spanish conquistadors basically had their way with the entirety of Central and South America. And that's, as we've covered in other episodes, that's not really an exaggeration comparing it to rape, because they literally did some raping back then, so maybe they deserve to be eaten by some of those Aztecs back then. Anyway, following the Louisiana Purchase of 1805, America basically doubled in size with a bunch of territory bought from France in one of the biggest bargain sales in history. Like, they got a shit ton of land for only $15 million. Like, it worked out to about $18 per square mile. A square mile is over 600 acres of land. Imagine getting all that land for like $20. That's pretty good.
Unfortunately, a decent-sized chunk of the Texas territory was included in this purchase, which kind of confused things since Spain owned the rest of it. And long story short, what followed was basically one of the bloodiest versions of two angry dads having an argument about how far their property extends out into the grass.
Yeah, Texas, during all this, Texas eventually fought for independence, but then it was later annexed, I don't always say annexed, later annexed by the United States, which only seems, I think I was thinking of Amex, fucking American Express. Anyway, Texas got its independence, and then it was later annexed by the United States, and that only seems right just because, like, I don't know, the modern day of America is just, not having Texas as a part of it just seems so foreign and weird, like. Admittedly, though, I gotta say, I'm almost kind of curious to think about what it would have been like if there was just, like, this small little country tucked away in between the U.S. and Mexico. Like, Texas is its own country. Like, would ICE just be, like, making housing raids and, like, mass deportations of Texans to take them back to the American border? Or would it be, like, vice versa? Would, like, Texas be kicking Americans out? Like, you fucking Americans think you can just waltz right on in here looking for cheap chili and 15-pound steaks? Well, this here is Texas, and everything's bigger in Texas, which means my foot is going to be gigantic when I kick your ass back into the United States of America with it.
Man, if that were the case, King of the Hill would have been a weird exotic sitcom about a foreign country.
That's so weird. It would have been like a British sitcom, but like the Texas sitcom. We were also going to say that, like, George W. Bush would have never been president, which, depending on how much you like or dislike the guy, your mileage may vary there. But, weirdly enough, George W. was born in Connecticut.
That is weird.
So weird. Like, actually, the only presidents of the United States to be born in Texas were Eisenhower and LBJ. As long as we're just like rattling off random fun facts, here's fun fact. While perusing the Wikipedia page for W, I discovered he's the only United States president to have an MBA degree, a master's in business. So, hey, good for him. At first I was going to say, like, well, that makes sense, because people with a master's in business don't generally go into politics. But then again, Donald Trump exists right now, and he was just a businessman, among other things. Though, I guess it's saying something that despite his whole shtick being business, he doesn't actually have an MBA. Huh. Make of that what you will.
Anyway, reeling it back in, Texas was finally annexed and officially became part of the U.S. in 1845. But by this point in time, Texas and Mexico were so culturally intertwined that this is basically where the idea of Tex-mex culture comes from. The people of Mexico and American travelers and explorers who settled in the area shared a lot of different foods, music, art, style, and whatnot. As such, it makes sense that such a cultural zeitgeist like chili con carne was the byproduct of that region as a whole.
Yeah, speaking of chili, we already mentioned that there were like early predecessors of chili being cooked in Mexico during like the 1800s and even further back, but they weren't really quite what we would consider to be modern chili con carne today. There's like a dozen or so theories as to how it came to be. However, we're just going to talk about one explanation for its invention. Well...
Okay, let's just say we're going to talk about the most plausible explanation, because another origin story we kept seeing pop up in the research sounds like something from an anime acid trip, since it involves a mystical Spanish nun astral projecting herself across the Atlantic Ocean to teach Native Americans in the Southwest how to cook chili made from antelopes during an altered mental state trance.
Huh.
Definitely a story.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, the most plausible explanation for the origins of chili is that it was the crossroads of traditional Southwestern cuisine with an infusion of cooking styles brought over from, wait for it, the Canary Islands. Plot twist! I bet you didn't see that one coming. Oh, and before anyone asks, canaries, the bird, they're from the Canary Islands. Never knew that, actually.
The Canary Islands are actually an archipelago. I knew that word in my head.
You
Trying
did
to
it.
say it out loud.
You made
Not
it.
as smooth. Located off the eastern coast of Africa, Morocco specifically, which are actually more occupied and associated with Spain and Europe. During the 1700s, migrants from the Canary Islands moved to San Antonio, Texas, and brought with them the idea for spiced stews featuring garlic and onions and a very liberal use of everyone's favorite Tex-mex seasoning, cumin.
Imagine if the Canary Islands immigrants were just a bunch of little canaries, little birds.
That'd be adorable.
They show up with little suitcases. They're like, hey, guys, we're here to show you how to cook really yummy soup. And then they just sing a cool tune.
That'd be adorable.
I wish. Yeah, but the less entertaining, more historically accurate version is due to some like political advocacy by Spain. They were trying to like stymie France out of Texas territory, so they basically just like did a bunch of propaganda and petitioned a bunch of families from the Canary Islands to like move to Texas to like help bolster its like Spanish heritage, because like they basically were just like, hey, do you want to make something for yourself? Move over to America, to this wacky, crazy place called Texas, and you'll be like royalty there. And I mean, it probably, it worked pretty good because, it got France out of Texas, but can't say it really worked out in the long run for Spain, considering Texas is part of the United States now. But, oh well, they tried. And hell, I mean, it was the best because these Canarian immigrants brought these stews with them, and over the next century or so, they blended together with the like chili stews that Mexicans and Texans had already been making. So before long, you had like working class women learning to make these like stews, and like small time eateries were cooking them up with like chilies and cumin and tomatoes and onions and garlic, and of course, carne, meat. So chili con carne was born.
Unfortunately, if you were hoping for some sort of clear-cut, fine-pointed invention or inventor, well, we got some bad news for you. You know how there was like 15 people who claimed to invent the hamburger because it was so popular?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for chili, there's the opposite problem, but for the same reason. It was so common at the time that basically nobody claims to have invented it. Much like we covered with burritos, it seems like the peak evolution of tasty traditional foods.
Yeah, that all aside, we can't pinpoint an inventor. No one really knows, like no one claims to have invented it, but we can at least pinpoint the earliest mentions of the word or the phrase chili con carne. It first popped up in San Antonio, Texas in the 1840s. It became very popular very quickly thanks to chili finding a place as an inexpensive street food for the common man. Mexican Tejana women began cooking it and selling it in what I can only imagine were like these little 19th century Texas equivalent of like laid back hole in the wall burrito grills and like food trucks. But back then they were probably wagons. But yeah. These chili queens, as they were known, they sold it out of little carts on the streets and even in front of the Alamo.
Hilariously enough, Spanish Catholic priests working missions in Texas at the time didn't particularly care for the dish. And by didn't care for it, I mean they preached sermons against it, claiming that partaking in fiery, indulgent dishes like chili con carne would net you a one-way ticket straight to hell.
Chili is hot. It's spicy. That means you go to the hot place, hell. What the hell was up with these like early Christian preachers just like hating on food that tasted good? Like, I don't get it. I am a devout Christian, and I'm proud to be part of a super chill, like LGBT affirming church. But if like I walked in one day and my pastor was like, so new rule, you can't eat pizza anymore or you'll go to hell, I would just fuck on right out of there and convert to Shintoism or something. No regrets. Send me to hell.
Apparently, the idea comes from the incredibly wrong, incredibly outdated belief that foods with strong flavors would incite impure thoughts.
Ooh.
You know, like how anytime you have a bowl of curry, you just have sex immediately after.
Of course.
It just happens, like, damn, that's a nice bowl of chicken korma. I love this. What? What happened? Where am I? Why am I in bed all of a sudden? Where are my clothes?
Oh, yeah, this kind of reminds me of good old Father Sylvester Graham, who we covered in the S'mores episode. If you need a quick reminder, he was another major advocate of perpetual misery and resisting the temptation of anything that featured a flavor. Like, repent all ye, for the Lord our God is angry. We have sinned, for we have slept with the windows closed. Leave your windows open and be cold, for that is the will of God Almighty. We humans are despicable monsters, defiling the good earth with our contemptible pleasures like salt and pepper. Unforgivable! The devil himself is greater than thee. Instead, you should live a terrible life, full of bland meals and a sore ass, for cushioned chairs are strictly forbidden by, well, not the Bible, and they're not forbidden by God or Jesus Christ himself, but still, resist the temptation of evils like coriander, and surely the rest of your eternity shall remain pure and boring. And, by the way, none of that was me taking, like, comedic liberty. That's all real. Like, go listen to the S'mores episode. Sylvester Graham literally preached that sleeping on soft, comfortable mattresses and closing your windows to keep cold drafts out was sinful. And that your diet should consist solely of gram flour, eggs, and a small collection of certain fresh fruits and vegetables. That guy was an asshole. Speaking of assholes, apparently those Catholic priests preaching didn't exactly work, so, because, like, chili exploded in popularity over the next few decades, and it quickly spread to the United States outside of Texas.
By 1881, only 3 or 4 decades into its life, chili had already reached the tip-top peak of popularity that all delicious home-cooked foods wish to achieve. Someone tried canning it.
Yeah, William Tobin, a former Texas Ranger who turned into a businessman after his service was up, he came up with the original idea to create canned chili, which could be preserved and heated up at a later date.
The idea was actually really successful. He quickly reached a contract with the U.S. government to create canned chili, which could be used for feeding troops in the Army and Navy, and opened his own canning facility for it.
Side note, but, like, can this dude get any more fucking American? Like, let's see here. Texas Ranger, check. Chili aficionado, check. Contractor for the United States military, check.
Oh, and also at one point he served as the city marshal for the Alamo.
Holy fucking shit, this guy was cool. Like, he's basically just like, now pardon me, Uncle Sam, but I wanted to petition you for a moment if I could, since I think I have an idea that would benefit the boys on the front line. You see, one time after a long day of cattle rustling and finishing up my daily rounds as a Texas Ranger, I stopped at a local chili joint, set my guitar down and ordered a bowl. I thanked the proprietor kindly and tipped him generously and went on my way. But then on the way home, I hitched my horse to take a breather, and I stopped for a moment. In the long, amber southwest sunset, I wiped my brow, and I looked up at the old red, white, and blue as the flag flew above my old house at the Alamo. I thought to myself, how can I give back to my country? What can I do? Then it hit me. Chili. Our troops need chili. It's their God-given right. And then a bald eagle carrying an olive branch and a rifle landed beside me and recited the Declaration of Independence and gave me a high five, and I knew it was a sign.
Very tragically, though, the poor guy died a few years into this contract, and in 1884 the business closed. What a bummer. This guy was ahead of his time, especially since canned chili wasn't seen or heard from again until almost a half a century later, when Lyman Davis of Corsicana, Texas began canning chili and selling it from the back of a wagon.
Yeah, this guy, he called his product Wolf Brand Chili in honor of his pet wolf, who's named Kaiser Bill. Like, once again, holy shit, like, all these stories, they sound like fan fiction written to create, like, the perfect American folk hero. Like, these guys are real, though. Like, afternoon, ma'am. Care to try some wolf chili? I named it after my buddy here, Kaiser Bill. He's a fucking wolf, and this is America, so if you don't like it, you can get out. Needless to say, the introduction of canned chili only helped its popularity in the rest of the United States. Chili parlors began opening up outside of Texas in the early 20th century, and a few decades later, in 1952, the very first chili cook-off took place in Dallas, which further cemented chili as an American staple. And the rest, well, they say, is history. Except for one small, trivial little asterisk that we do need to address. Beans.
Beans, for whatever reason, are a huge point of contention with chili aficionados. Some people claim that beans are necessary for chili, and some purists say the opposite, that chili is supposed to be meat and meat only.
The first mentions of beans we could find being cooked in chili comes from around the early 1900s, which coincidentally is around when chili con carne began taking off in the rest of America.
Interestingly, beans, as we mentioned earlier, were a staple food in Aztec cuisine, so they've been around for centuries and were most likely used in some of the early stews that served as predecessors to modern chili. Following suit, Mexican food and Tex-mex as a whole tends to use beans in many dishes as well, so it's not out of the question to suppose that beans were found in early chili con carne.
That said, the International Chili Society, which we'll talk about later on in the modern day section, they strictly define chili as any kind of meat or combination of meats cooked with red chili peppers, various spices, and other ingredients, with the exception of beans and pasta, which are strictly forbidden.
Ouch. That's some extreme shade thrown at beans. Seems kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, like, especially when you consider that this fucking definition, it states verbatim various spices and other ingredients. So in other words, it leaves the door wide open for literally anything but beans, which it explicitly forbids.
Yogurt? Sure thing.
Yeah, grape jelly? Cool.
Ice cream? That works.
Wasabi? A little ethnic, but sure, why not?
Toenails? A-okay.
The blood of a freshly slain newborn baby boy.
Cool. But black beans? Oh, no. Absolutely fucking not. No way in hell. Never beans.
Honestly, it seems kind of arbitrary. No one really gives a good explanation for it. Hell, the International Chili Society was founded in 1967, which is over a century after chili was invented. So, I don't know, guys. Beans have been around way longer than you have.
It's tricky because, like, I don't know. It seems like Texans are the most ardent opponents of beans in chili. So, like, you know, who are we to question them? Like, I know if a bunch of people outside of New York were just, like, insisting that penne alla vodka should have peas added to it, I would fucking go full on Guido mode and tell them to fuck right off. I don't know. In the end, it doesn't seem like there's an answer to this debate. It just feels like one of those stupid, like, traditional feuds that only exist because people like to wrap themselves up in a really harmless argument that doesn't matter at the end of the day, just for funsies.
Well, unless there's been actual fistfights or stabbings or something over the bean debate. In which case, holy shit, guys, find something better to fight about.
Yeah. Really, though, like, it's silly. We shouldn't be fighting about chili. Like, chili is basically the food equivalent of the melting pot metaphor that you hear America compared to all the time. It brings all these different cultures together. Like, the original stews that inspired chili have their origins in Aztec and Canary Island cuisine. The modern incarnation of it is an American invention from Texas, and you had Mexican Tejana women who helped modern iteration of chili grow in popularity, and a German-American dude invented chili powder, which is one of the key ingredients necessary for helping it spread elsewhere. It was a real team effort, an international team effort, and that is just beautiful. Anyway, the story doesn't quite stop there, because now it's time to get modern and see what people have been doing chili in recent history, and also we're going to be bringing on a special guest who is an official, well, unofficial Texas...
Official to us.
He's official to us because he's a born and bred Texan, which makes him an official connoisseur of chili, even though I don't know if he actually, like, is a connoisseur of chili. But we're going to have a special guest, so keep it here. Hey peeps, before we make it to the modern day section with our special guest, we also have one brief message from one of our podcast partners, so give her a listen and check it out.
Hi, Hi, my name is Kaylin, and I'm the host of a new podcast called Tea Time Thoughts. Do you ever wish you could learn more about history, books, music, art, and culture, but you just don't know where to start? I totally feel your pain. Learning about all these things can be so overwhelming. Well, I want to change all of that for you. In my podcast, Tea Time Thoughts, I'll show you just how fun it all can be. In the time it takes to have a cup of tea, I'm going to teach you everything from the French Revolution to the Black Plague, Mozart to Broadway musicals, Da Vinci to Robert Frost, ancient Egypt to Queen Elizabeth II, and more. You can stream Tea Time Thoughts wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So what are you waiting for? Put the kettle on and listen to Tea Time Thoughts today.